Our interest and our concerns are with respect to the nuclear waste that's going to be generated by this project and the potential for those nuclear waste to be moved around, potentially to someplace in Northern Ontario, maybe Southern Ontario, but nuclear waste is really the big issue for us in this review. A nuclear power plant, it's really much more a nuclear waste generating project than it is an electricity generating project. The electricity is fleeting. That's a fleeting benefit. The nuclear waste, unfortunately, lasts forever. So this project will generate large volumes of nuclear fuel waste, high-level waste, and the industry's intent is to find some community that is in economic difficulties to such a degree that they will consider putting themselves on the receiving end of all of this nuclear fuel waste. Radioactive waste is the longest living hazardous material ever created. It doesn't exist in nature. Uranium goes into the reactor and over 250 different radioactive isotopes come out of the reactor. Those radioactive isotopes are lethal. When a fuel bundle first comes out of a reactor, it's so lethal that 20 seconds exposure and you're finished. It's handled robotically, it's moved from the reactor to the pool, to dry storage containers, if it goes that far. There's no real rules as to when a nuclear plant moves their waste from the pool into dry storage. And so for economy's sake, they often leave it in the pool longer until it becomes too crowded, and then they're forced to move it out. So the waste is really a lasting legacy. It must be contained, it must be isolated from the environment into perpetuity. And there really is no means to date of accomplishing that. We had a 10-year environmental assessment hearing from the late 1980s through to the late 1990s. And in that hearing, the industry failed to make the case. They did not demonstrate that this notion they have of burying nuclear waste in a rock formation could be demonstrated to be safely done. In fact, the argument, the debate in that hearing became not one of if there would be a release, but when, to what degree, to what effect the release. The industry doesn't actually, if you read very carefully, they never say that a geological repository will isolate the waste into perpetuity. They say it'll keep them in there for a long time. Well, that's not going to be long enough. And when the waste is put into a geological repository and gradually, or perhaps not so gradually, is released to the environment, it won't stand still. Those releases, as we're seeing the releases from Fukushima Daiichi, they're moving, they're mobile. But the industry has an idea that if you're poor enough and you're far enough away from Queen's Park, you're a likely target for nuclear fuel waste. I don't think it's ethical to create burdens that future generations into time immemorial are going to be left to deal with. There may be some short-term economic, maybe even some short-term social benefits of generating electricity, but there are many, many different ways that that electricity could be generated that don't result in the kind of long-lasting hazards that we see with nuclear power and nuclear waste generation.